There is a $9 billion industry that depends on you never learning the secret I'm about to share today. Every spring, millions of gardeners buy chemical pesticides, spray their plants, and watch the bugs disappear for a while. But by midsummer, the pests return, often worse than before, because those chemicals do not just kill pests, they also destroy the tiny predators that once kept the garden in balance. That endless cycle is exactly what keeps the industry thriving. However, a few hundred miles west of Manhattan, in the farmlands of Pennsylvania and Ohio, more than 44,000 Amish farmers have been growing abundant gardens for over 300 years without buying a single bottle of synthetic pesticide. Today, we are going to uncover their remarkable secrets, how they recruit natural insect armies, build clever traps from simple kitchen scraps, and design gardens pests simply cannot survive in. If you stay until the end, I will reveal the legendary one-stick method, a brilliantly simple trick using a piece of household rubbish that stops one of the most destructive garden pests in its tracks. Let us dive in and take back our gardens. Before we talk about soil, you need to hear a story that sounds almost unbelievable. It begins with an Amish boy named John Kempf. He had only an 8th grade education, yet his discovery would challenge one of the most common assumptions in modern agriculture. John grew up on a farm in Ohio in the early 2000s. His father was the regional supplier of pesticides, and like many farms in America, their fields were sprayed regularly. But something troubling kept happening. For 3 years in a row, waves of insects and disease destroyed nearly 70% of their crops. Then in 2004, the family rented a neighboring field from a dairy farmer. That farmer did not use chemicals at all. He relied only on crop rotation and natural soil care. The Kemp family planted cantaloupes across both fields, expecting the same results. But the harvest told a very different story. On the heavily sprayed field, nearly 80% of the leaves were covered in powdery mildew. On the untreated field next door, there was almost no disease at all. You could literally draw a line across the soil where the two approaches met. The question haunted young John: how could insects and disease know the difference? He went to the library and spent the next 2 years reading university textbooks on plant physiology. What he discovered was something astonishing. Plants have something very much like an immune system. When a plant grows in rich, biologically active soil, it converts simple nitrates into complete proteins. Here is the crucial detail. Most pest insects, like caterpillars and aphids, have extremely simple digestive systems. They can only digest those simple nitrates. They cannot process complete proteins. So, when a pest lands on a truly healthy plant, it takes a bite, finds nothing it can digest, and moves on. That discovery revealed a powerful truth the Amish have understood for generations. The real way to defeat pests is not by killing them, but by building stronger plants. Every spring before planting, Amish gardeners work 2 to 3 inches of aged compost and manure into their soil. That living soil strengthens the plant's natural defenses, helping vegetables grow so healthy that many pests simply lose interest. In other words, the best pest control begins long before the insects ever arrive. Now let us step into the garden itself. Most conventional gardens in America are planted in neat, tidy rows. One long row of cabbages, another row of tomatoes, another row of beans. To us, it looks organized and efficient, but to a cabbage moth flying overhead, that straight row of cabbages is a glowing neon sign that says all-you-can-eat buffet. Insects do not navigate gardens the way we do. They follow scent on the wind. Plants release tiny chemical signals that guide pests directly to their favorite food. If a cabbage moth catches the scent of cabbage drifting through the air, it simply follows that invisible trail until dinner appears beneath its wings. The Amish disrupt this process with something scientists call olfactory confusion. Instead of planting only vegetables, they surround their entire garden with a dense border of powerful-smelling herbs and flowers. Imagine it like a living wall of fragrance, an aromatic fortress protecting everything inside. French marigolds are one of their favorites. Beneath the soil, the roots release a natural compound that helps suppress destructive root knot nematodes. Above the soil, their strong scent helps deter whiteflies and cabbage moths searching for a place to land. Basil is planted generously as well, sometimes every 8 or 10 inches along the garden edge. Its intense aroma helps repel mosquitoes and even discourages tomato hornworm moths from laying eggs nearby. Some Amish gardeners even plant catnip around the borders. Studies have shown that the natural oils in catnip can repel mosquitoes far more effectively than many commercial repellents. To a hungry insect approaching from the air, this wall of fragrance is overwhelming. The scent of cabbage, tomato, or squash becomes scrambled in a cloud of stronger smells. The pest grows disorientated, wastes energy searching, and often gives up entirely, flying off in search of an easier meal somewhere else. The Amish do not try to eliminate insects from the world. They simply make their gardens the most confusing place a pest could possibly try to navigate. Many of us were taught that a healthy garden should have no bugs at all, but an Amish farmer might gently smile at that idea and say that a garden without any bugs is a dead garden. Their goal is not to eliminate insects. Their goal is balance. Instead of fighting every bug that appears, Amish gardeners quietly recruit an unpaid army that works around the clock. These tiny allies patrol the garden day and night, hunting the pests that damage plants. A single ladybird, for example, can eat up to 5,000 aphids in its lifetime. Parasitic wasps are even more dramatic hunters. They locate tomato hornworms, lay their eggs inside the pest's body, and the developing larvae slowly destroy the caterpillar from within. Meanwhile, beneath the leaves and soil, ground beetles patrol the garden floor after dark, feeding on slugs, grubs, and other destructive insects while you sleep. But these helpers will only stay if the garden welcomes them. So Amish gardeners plant what are called insectary strips, clusters of plants with tiny flowers that produce nectar and pollen for beneficial insects. Yarrow, sweet alyssum, fennel, and Queen Anne's lace are common choices. These small blossoms act like food stations for the predators that protect the garden. They also leave certain plants, like dill, to grow tall and flower instead of cutting them down. Those flowering stems become what they jokingly call bug hotels, places where helpful insects can feed and rest. Sometimes in one quiet corner of the property, they simply leave a patch of land a little wild and unmown. That untidy space becomes shelter for ground beetles and other natural hunters. The lesson is beautifully simple. If you build the right habitat, nature will send the workers, and those tiny guardians will defend your garden far more tirelessly than any chemical ever could. One of the most powerful pest control methods in Amish gardens does not come from a tool, a spray, or a product. It comes from a daily habit. In the quiet hours of the morning, before the summer heat settles over the fields, Amish gardeners perform something so simple that many modern gardeners overlook it completely. They take what they call the morning walk. With a small bucket of soapy water in hand, they slowly walk the garden rows. There is no rush, just a calm, careful inspection that lasts 15 or 20 minutes. They gently lift the wide leaves of squash plants and glance along the stems of tomatoes. Over time, they learn to read the tiny clues plants give when trouble is nearby. For example, if they notice small black droppings scattered across the lower leaves of a tomato plant, they know exactly what it means. Somewhere above, perfectly camouflaged against the stem, a large green hornworm is quietly feeding. When they spot a cluster of bronze-colored squash bug eggs neatly lined up on the underside of a leaf, they do not panic. They simply scrape the eggs away with a thumbnail and drop them into the bucket of soapy water. Problem solved in seconds. This quiet routine works because real garden disasters rarely appear overnight. They begin small, a few eggs here, a single caterpillar there. Left unnoticed, those few insects multiply until they become hundreds. But by walking the garden each morning, Amish gardeners catch the problem when it is still tiny. 3 pests instead of 300. The result is powerful in its simplicity. No chemicals, no expense, and no complicated equipment. Just a few peaceful minutes each morning staying connected to the garden and gently guiding it back into balance. Now we arrive at one of the most surprising parts of Amish pest control. When insects invade, Amish gardeners do not rush to the shop. Instead, they walk into the kitchen. With a few simple pantry ingredients, they build traps so effective they almost feel like cheating. Take flying pests, for example: wasps, fruit flies, and certain moths. The Amish often build what is called an upside-down bottle trap. They cut the top third off a plastic bottle and flip it upside down to form a funnel. Inside the bottle, they mix warm water, sugar, and a pinch of yeast. As this mixture begins to ferment, It releases a scent that mimics rotting fruit. To insects, it smells irresistible. They follow the scent down through the funnel, but once inside, they cannot find their way back out. Hung along the edge of the garden, a single trap like this can catch hundreds of flying pests within just a couple of days. But flying insects are only part of the battle. If you have ever woken up to find lettuce leaves shredded overnight, you have probably met the slug. For them, Amish gardeners use the famous beer trap. They simply bury a shallow container, like a tuna tin or yogurt pot, so the rim sits level with the soil. Then they pour in cheap beer or a simple, homemade mixture of water, sugar, flour, and yeast. Slugs navigate almost entirely by smell, and they are strangely attracted to fermentation. In the dark of night, they crawl towards the scent, tip over the edge of the container, and fall in. By morning, one small pot may hold dozens of them. Tiny insects require a different trick. Aphids and cucumber beetles are strongly attracted to bright yellow, a color that signals tender new plant growth. Amish gardeners take advantage of this instinct by placing yellow boards or plates near vulnerable plants, coated with a thin layer of sticky petroleum jelly. The insects fly towards the color and become trapped instantly. For crawling pests that chew seedlings at night, like earwigs or woodlice, another simple trap appears. A wide-mouthed jar is buried in the soil and filled with a mixture of molasses and warm water. The sweet, heavy scent drifts across the ground, drawing insects towards it. Once inside, the sticky liquid holds them there. No poisons, no expensive products, just clever observation, simple materials, and the quiet understanding that sometimes the most powerful solutions are already waiting in the kitchen cupboard. Imagine something remarkable for a moment. What if, instead of fighting pests, you could simply tell them where to go and keep them away from your vegetables entirely? This is exactly what Amish gardeners do through a clever strategy called trap cropping. The idea is beautifully simple. Instead of protecting your plants by force, you give pests something they love even more. Take aphids, for example. These tiny insects are irresistibly attracted to nasturtium flowers. Amish gardeners often plant a ring of nasturtiums along the outer edges of the garden. When aphids arrive, they head straight for those flowers, completely bypassing the peppers, beans, and other vegetables growing nearby. Soon the nasturtiums become covered in aphids, and surprisingly, the gardeners leave them there. This is because that gathering of aphids becomes a feast that attracts the garden's natural predators. Ladybirds arrive, parasitic wasps follow, the predators feed, the pest population drops, and the vegetables remain largely untouched. The same strategy works with other crops as well. Radishes are sometimes planted to lure flea beetles away from aubergines, and a special squash called Blue Hubbard is often used as a sacrificial plant, drawing destructive squash, vine borers away from more delicate courgette plants. Instead of endless fighting, the Amish quietly redirect the battle. They simply give the pests a better target, and the garden stays safe. Some of the most effective pest defenses in Amish gardens are not plants at all. They are simple physical barriers made from materials many families already have at home. For anyone with a fireplace or wood-burning stove, there is a hidden treasure waiting in the ash bucket. Amish gardeners often sprinkle a thin ring of cooled wood ash around vulnerable plants, such as cabbage or hostas. The ash forms a dry, alkaline, gritty barrier across the soil surface. When soft-bodied pests like slugs or snails attempt to cross it, the ash quickly dehydrates their bodies. They retreat almost immediately, and as an added bonus, that same ash slowly enriches the soil with valuable minerals like potassium and calcium. Another remarkable barrier comes from something called diatomaceous earth, often shortened to DE. At first glance, it looks like harmless white powder, but under a microscope, it reveals something extraordinary. It is made from the fossilized remains of microscopic aquatic organisms whose shells are covered with tiny, razor-sharp edges. When insects like beetles, earwigs, or other soft-bodied pests crawl through food-grade DE, those microscopic edges damage their protective outer coating. The insects gradually lose moisture and dehydrate. There are no chemicals involved, no toxins, and no poisons. Just a silent mechanical defense that pests cannot adapt to and cannot resist. Once again, the Amish prove a quiet truth about gardening. Sometimes the simplest barriers are the strongest ones. Even in the most carefully balanced garden, a determined pest may occasionally slip through the defenses. When that happens, Amish gardeners have a simple backup plan that has been used for generations. And once again, the solution begins in the kitchen. They start with a full head of garlic and a handful of the hottest cayenne peppers they can find. Both are chopped finely and steeped overnight in a quart of warm water. By morning, the mixture has become a powerful natural concentrate. The liquid is strained into a spray bottle, and a few drops of mild washing up liquid are added to help the spray cling to plant leaves. When applied to plants, the effect is surprisingly powerful. The capsaicin from the peppers creates an intense irritation for soft-bodied insects on contact. At the same time, the strong garlic scent overwhelms the insect's sense of smell, making it extremely difficult for them to locate the plant again. Aphids, beetles, and many other pests quickly retreat, yet bees, beneficial insects, and the soil itself remain unharmed. Of course, anyone who has handled hot peppers knows there is one important rule to remember: wash your hands thoroughly afterwards. A lesson most gardeners only need to learn once. But there is another Amish trick involving garlic that is even more surprising. Some families quietly bury crushed garlic cloves about 2 inches deep around the edges of squash and cucumber beds at planting time. As those cloves slowly decompose in the soil, they release sulfur compounds that spread gently through the surrounding earth. For pests that live underground, especially destructive insects like squash vine borers, those compounds create an invisible barrier. The insects encounter the sulfur-rich soil before reaching the plant roots and often turn away. It is a quiet defense working below the surface long before the gardener ever sees a problem. Once again, the lesson is simple. Sometimes the most effective protection does not come from a bottle, but from a few humble ingredients already sitting in the kitchen. Among all the Amish pest control methods, this one may be the most enjoyable to watch. For generations, Amish families have quietly integrated poultry into their gardens, not as pets and not just for eggs, but as living pest control. A small flock of 4 to 6 hens can make a remarkable difference when allowed into the garden for short, supervised periods, usually in the early morning or late afternoon. They begin hunting immediately. Beetles, grubs, grasshoppers, and slugs disappear with astonishing speed as the birds move through the beds. They work like tiny vacuum cleaners for pests. Some Amish gardeners even prefer guinea fowl for this job. Guinea fowl are particularly fond of Japanese beetles and ticks, treating them almost like sweets. Unlike chickens, they are less likely to scratch aggressively at the soil, which means delicate plants are often left undisturbed. The beauty of this system is its simplicity. The birds eat the insects that threaten the garden, their droppings return nutrients to the soil, and in return, the gardener receives fresh eggs each morning. It becomes a small, natural cycle where every part supports the others. Of course, timing is important. Amish gardeners allow the birds into the garden only at certain moments of the day and remove them once the plants begin to ripen. Otherwise, those curious hens might decide your tomatoes look just as delicious as the beetles. Managed carefully, however, this living partnership turns the garden into a balanced ecosystem where the pest problem quite literally walks away on 2 feet. We have finally reached the secret I promised at the beginning. Of all the Amish techniques, this one may be the most astonishing in its simplicity. It costs almost nothing, takes only minutes to do, and yet it quietly defeats one of the most destructive pests in the garden. Have you ever stepped into your garden on a cool spring morning and felt that sinking feeling? Yesterday, your seedlings were standing tall and green, and today they are lying sideways in the soil as if someone cut them down during the night. There are no holes in the leaves and no insects in sight, just a cleanly severed stem. The culprit is a hidden enemy called the cutworm. This nocturnal larva hides in the soil during the day and emerges after dark. It crawls along the surface, finds a young seedling, and chews straight through the tender stem. Entire rows of seedlings can vanish overnight. Millions of dollars are spent each year on chemical dust and treatments to stop this invisible attacker. But Amish gardeners solve the problem with something most of us throw away without thinking: an empty cardboard toilet roll. When they plant a young seedling, they simply slide that cardboard tube gently over the plant like a collar. Then they press the tube about 1 inch into the soil, leaving 2 inches standing above the surface. That is it. The entire method takes less than a minute, but the brilliance lies in what happens next. The cardboard collar forms a small fortress around the stem, preventing the cutworm from reaching the plant. The larva cannot climb over the edge, and it cannot chew through the barrier. The seedling remains protected during its most vulnerable stage of growth. Then nature takes over. Over the next 4 to 6 weeks, rain and soil microbes slowly soften the cardboard until it breaks down and disappears into the earth. During that exact same time, the plant stem thickens and hardens, developing the tough, woody structure that insects can no longer bite through. By the time the cardboard collar is gone, the plant no longer needs protection. The defense arrives precisely when the plant is fragile and quietly disappears when the plant becomes strong. No plastic, no chemicals, and no expensive products, just a piece of household rubbish, a few seconds of effort, and a garden saved seedling by seedling. Perhaps that is why this simple wisdom has never become a billion-dollar product. After all, no company can patent a cardboard tube. As autumn arrives and the air begins to cool, many gardens slowly fade into dormancy. Tomato vines collapse, leaves dry and curl, and many gardeners simply leave everything standing until spring. But in Amish gardens, the end of the growing season marks the beginning of one of the most important pest control steps of the entire year. Because hidden among those dying leaves are the next season's enemies. Pests like squash bugs and flea beetles often lay their eggs on old plant debris before winter arrives. Others burrow into the top layer of soil and remain there through the cold months, waiting patiently for spring to bring fresh food. If nothing disturbs them, they wake up the following year, already living exactly where they want to be. The Amish quietly break this cycle with a careful autumn cleanup. After the final harvest, every spent plant is pulled from the ground. Dead vines, dry leaves, and leftover debris are gathered and removed from the garden beds. Then, using a garden fork, the top few inches of soil are gently turned over. This simple step exposes hidden eggs and larvae to the freezing winter air. The brutal cold does what chemicals never could, destroying many of the pests before the next season even begins. Once the soil has been turned, Amish gardeners spread a thick blanket of well-aged manure across the beds. This layer enriches the soil while also covering and suppressing anything that might still remain. But their preparation does not stop there. The final step is crop rotation, a quiet strategy that confuses pests year after year. Plants are grouped by family, tomatoes and peppers together, squash and melons in another group, cabbage and broccoli in a third, and beans or peas in a fourth. Each new season, these plant families are moved to completely different garden beds. So when a pest wakes up in the spring soil expecting a feast of tomatoes, it may instead find a bed of cabbage growing there. With its preferred food gone, the pest population quickly declines. By the time spring arrives again, the garden is already one step ahead. Once again, the Amish remind us that the best pest control often begins long before the first seed is planted. As we step back and look at all these Amish techniques together, a deeper lesson begins to appear. These gardeners are not simply fighting pests, they are following a philosophy. In Amish life, there is an old German word, Gelassenheit. It does not translate perfectly, but it means yielding to the natural order. It means letting go of the urge to control everything and trusting that nature already holds a balance within it. When we rely on chemicals, we may win a battle for a moment, but we often lose the larger war. Sprays can kill pests, but they also wipe out the ladybirds, the parasitic wasps, and the delicate systems that quietly protect our gardens. But when we build healthy soil, plant flowers for beneficial insects, and protect young seedlings with something as simple as a cardboard roll, we are no longer fighting nature. We are working with it. And that may be the real secret behind these Amish gardens. Not expensive products, but simple habits practiced patiently over generations. So as you look out at your own garden this season, remember that you already have most of what you need. A few flowers, a handful of compost, perhaps a little wood ash from the fireplace, and yes, maybe even a cardboard tube saved from the recycling bin. If these ancient secrets have changed the way you look at the life growing in your back garden, please subscribe and like this video. We are dedicated to uncovering the history and wisdom that modern industry has tried to bury. Let us cultivate a better future together. The next treasure of knowledge will be revealed soon. Happy growing, my friends.